Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. So long time no manga talk. I feel like my channel has turned into me just buying and showcasing a ton of merch. I mean, there's a reason why my Instagram handle is Cadence Collects. But today's video is a reading log. I've got quite a bit of series to talk about, so do check the description if you just want to skip around. So let's get started. First series is Something's Wrong With Us, Volume 13. This series is riddled with so much misfortune, twists, and turns. It's definitely a manga that will keep you guessing as to what will ultimately come to light as the truth regarding an incident at the Kogetsuhan and subsequent framing of Nao's mother, which that isn't a spoiler, by the way, since all this happens in the very first volume and first chapter. It's really what kickstarts the storytelling. But at this point, we do have some other characters in the series getting a more prominent role, or more like their intentions are slowly being revealed. One of them is a character I really like, regardless of how he actually turns out. I mean, maybe. But either way, I do have two volumes I haven't read yet, volumes 14 and 15, which are sitting on my shelves, so I gotta get to it. Next series is the manhwa Something About Us by Yoonji Lee. I read volumes 1 to 5, which I think includes all 16 side stories after the main story. I had started reading this a long time ago, but never got around to finishing it because it's such a slow burn in my opinion, and slow burns are hit or miss for me and kind of depends on my mood. But I finally decided to finish reading it, and I'm glad I did. It follows two childhood best friends, Ga-young and Woo-jin, as they go through their university school life and some work internship life, all while trying to navigate the ways in which their relationship shifts and changes. As with all friends to lovers tropes, there's always that hesitation because of how it will affect their friendship, the anxiety on what being intimate even means for them when boundaries are not what they used to be, how to cross those boundaries, and how to communicate their feelings, although that's just a common trope for every relationship. But I feel like this manhwa is quite realistic, and I do like how the author told this story from both Ga-young and Woo-jin's perspectives. The two also have a lot of moments where they grow closer but then pull apart, which can be frustrating. But by the end of it, I did feel like something was still lacking with how the main couple's story ended. But I'm probably just being greedy because it's not like there was anything wrong with how their story wrapped up, but it's just me wanting more happy scenes. Either way, it's a sweet story and the art has this really nice, delicate feeling to it. Then I read volume 3 of How I Met My Soulmate by Anashin. I love the development of the two main characters, Yuki and Yuri, in this volume. I think they have great chemistry. And the fact that this is set after high school is a plus because we get a cast that is more upfront about their feelings and actions. Of course, there's still hesitations and misunderstandings, but it doesn't feel like it's dragged out. The art is stunning in every volume. Seriously, I want Anashin to style and revamp my wardrobe. Only thing I will say is that there's this ongoing plot regarding Yuri's brother that I'm not sure I care for yet, or maybe at all. Kind of depends on how it moves along, but yeah. Other than that, I'm still enjoying this series and super excited that the English Volume 1 is releasing at the end of this year. Another shoujo I read is volumes 2 to 3 of In the Clear Moonlit Dusk by Mika Yamamori, and again, another beautifully illustrated manga. The art really elevates this fairly simple story, and I don't say simple in a negative way because I think Mika Yamamori in general tends to write some really sweet female leads and companion male leads that you can't help but love as well. We have Yoi and Kohaku, who are trying to find out what this feeling of being drawn to someone means. So there's a lot of experimenting when it comes to things like, how do I describe this feeling I get when holding hands, or almost kissing, or wanting to just be around someone and only them? With the way Volume 3 ended, it's reminding me that I still need to read Volume 4. This next one is going to be a bit of a downer because I'm not going to have glowing reviews for it, so if you want to skip along, feel free to do so, but I read volumes 1 to 9 of The King's Beast by Rei Toma. As you can see, I don't own the physical volumes anymore because I went ahead and sold them, hopefully to someone who will appreciate it more than I did. I was looking forward to reading this, but after the first half of the first volume, I was already worried I wasn't going to enjoy it. I opted to keep reading to see if it got better, also because I literally bought the 9 volumes, so I felt obligated to read them, but it continued to do things that I wasn't too keen on. So basically, Rangetsu is an Ajin that disguises herself as a boy in order to integrate herself within the palace and avenge the death of her brother. The pacing and transitions felt odd. The story can't seem to decide if it wants to be dark, dramatic, lighthearted, romantic. It tries to do it all, which is totally fine, as other series do that too, but I don't think it's executed that well here. Some things border on fairly suggestive, so that caught me off guard as well. Not that that's a bad thing, but I think if it's going to do things like that, it should run with it rather than introducing things in a half-hearted manner. I'm being cryptic because I don't want to spoil anything, but I guess to kind of explain what I'm saying a bit better, generally the build-ups were okay, but it blasted through major issues quickly, so it's like it didn't matter as much. The summary even says, the political currents in the palace run deep, but I don't think the political world building was done that extensively. I was expecting so much more tension and intrigue considering the plot, only to see that majority of the characters got along so well. It was strange. So after 9 volumes, I was still not invested in any of the characters or relationship building, and I decided I would drop the series. I was disappointed because I love the covers. The art is so nice too. I do see many others who enjoy this series, which is great, but it definitely wasn't for me. Then I read Hell's Paradise volumes 1 to 13 as a buddy read with a friend from Instagram. I read it before the anime aired, which I watched the series with some Discord friends as episodes were releasing. I guess I'll do a quick anime review at the end, but in terms of the manga and story, it follows Gabimaru, a ruthless ninja, and a variety of other criminals sentenced to die, as they're offered a chance at a pardon if someone is able to extract the elixir of life from an island for the shogun. I really enjoyed the read-through and generally liked all the characters, especially the Aza brothers and Yuzuriha. Of course, Gabimaru was great because of his unyielding drive to try and get the pardon so he can live a normal life back at home with his wife. It was refreshing because it had a lot of comedic relief, so it wasn't totally dark and bleak the entire time, and overall, it was able to change the way I perceived some characters, including the villainous characters, based on how they developed, their backstory, and their motivations. For 13 volumes, it was able to get me invested in certain characters and tear up along the way. I do wish it was longer because I think the world building could have used some breathing room, as there's a lot to unpack and explore if the manga wanted to. But regardless, the art is really amazing as well, and while it is a mature rating, it didn't feel fan servicey because it felt natural and not gratuitous just for the sake of being gratuitous. Regarding the anime, I originally thought, oh, Mappa will do it justice after seeing the trailer. And then while some friends and I were watching it, I don't know, so many parts lacked quality and there were some odd choices as to who got more screen time over others. Pacing felt off, although I do know there's quite a bit that needs to be explained in the world of Hell's Paradise, and there's still more of the manga to adapt. But I wasn't very impressed with the anime, unfortunately, and thought it was just fine, like a 6 out of 10. I reread volumes 1 to 3 of Tokyo Aliens by Naoe. I mentioned this before when I hauled the 3rd volume in my May manga haul video, but Akira, the main character's personality, is not my favorite. He's like an over-the-top nervous wreck and kind of reminds me of Zenitsu from Demon Slayer, who I'm really not a fan of. Akira is definitely not as bad as Zenitsu, but anyways, I mean, you get the point. The story for Tokyo Aliens is good and interesting enough. It doesn't blow me away in the same manner that the art does for this series, which the art does have a flair for dramatics when it comes to fight scenes. And some friends and I joke around about all the ikemens, which in most ways we're actually being serious about it. But I will say that there are several characters in here that are definitely intriguing. Like there's a backstory and seemingly complicated relationship that I want to know more about and see how these characters became who they are now. So I'm continuing to read along as these volumes get released. Another reread was the Monster Omnibuses Volumes 1 to 2, which contain the singles 1 to 4 by Naoki Urasawa. I don't know why I keep doing this, but I say reread because I read these same Omnis last year and stopped at this same spot yet again. It's not that I don't enjoy the story, because I really do. It's fascinating and totally up my alley when it comes to mystery, suspense, and a little bit of thriller. There were times when it kind of scared me to read it at night, so I paused it to read something a little less dark. But the art style also really sets an ominous mood. I don't know if this is going to make any sense, but it just feels like the story is perpetually set during nighttime, which isn't always the case, but you know how things are much creepier when stuff happens at night? But anyways, for a series centered around a mystery, I don't want to give away too much, but it basically follows Dr. Tenma in post-war Germany. That's all I'll say about that. But during my second read-through, it reminded me of how much I despise certain characters and the frustration I felt early on, which is not a critique on the story itself, but shows how well they're written and the resulting struggles stemming from these crooked characters. So hopefully I'll be able to focus back on finally reading the entirety of this series. Next series I read was Those Not So Sweet Boys, Volumes 1 to 7 by Yoko no Giri. This was another series that I unhauled and knew I was going to do that based on my initial thoughts when I started reading it, but I wanted to at least give it a shot to see how it turned out. Not gonna lie, my impression of this series was a bit tainted because I had read Love and Focus before. It's another series by this mangaka, and I was pretty bored and unimpressed. Majority of my read-through for that series and Those Not So Sweet Boys was not so memorable. Pun intended. Nothing really stood out to me in the first half, and then the second half was a bit more interesting but somewhat random. I feel like some of the male characters weren't explored that much and were very surface level. Like, I liked Goshima's character, the one whose family is involved in a gang and has 2 cute younger siblings, but we didn't get much more than knowing that's his situation. And it barely got into Rei, the main male lead situation, until the latter half. Midori is headstrong though, so I'll give the series that. But I don't know, it's very linear, and not to say that stories have to have this crazy plot, but there are other shoujo manga out there that do simple and straightforward much better in my opinion. Next series was a reread for me and something I buddy read with several friends on Instagram, including KK-chan here on YouTube, and it's Horimiya Volumes 1 to 16. This was in preparation for the quote-unquote final Volume 16 release that happened back in May, even though Volume 17 released already in Japan. Who knows what Yen Press will do, but I hope they print Volume 17, even though they put the words final on the cover, which was kind of silly, and I'm not sure why they did that. But anyways, this is a top favorite series for me for several reasons. Hori and Miyamura are one of my OTPs, and yes, I do recognize that there may be some qualities in their characterizations that feel random and unnecessary, like Hori and her sadistic tendencies. In those instances, I don't dwell on it that much because you know when you're getting to know someone in a relationship and it's not until further in that you start getting really comfortable with them and maybe the strange or interesting quirks come out or you discover random stuff together. That's how I saw it. It didn't come out right away, and that's how I rationalized it. But their relationship in general is very sweet and very much them living their day-to-day lives alongside their group of friends, which is ultimately what the full series is about, and is one of my favorites that gives me such a sense of youthfulness and nostalgia. These next 2 volumes I read are Galaxy Next Door, Volumes 2 and 3. I don't have these anymore because I also unhauled them. I was already skeptical after I read the first volume, but I wanted to read a bit more to see if maybe I would feel a connection to the main couple, which consists of a guy who's taken on the responsibility of raising his two younger siblings after their parents died, and then a literal otherworldly princess that shows up at his doorstep to be his manga assistant. They are sweet with each other, and it's cute how the siblings tend to push them together. But I don't know, I just couldn't get past the manner in which their fates get tied together, and everything felt very one note that I was getting a bit bored reading about what they end up doing in each chapter. From here onwards, I'll be talking about only BL and one GL series I read. A majority of these are mature rated and come with explicit content and a variety of trigger warnings, so be sure to be wary of those for series that I talk about. I read this one-shot, A Home Far Away by Taki Yatsuda. This one does have a tragedy tag and has quite a bit of trigger warnings, such as abuse of all kinds. It follows Alan, who runs away from his home, his town, his family, and all things associated with them. He meets Hayden, where they learn to rely on each other and basically attempt to live a carefree life. Of course, it's never that easy. This one has a religious aspect to it that did make me pretty uncomfortable, but I appreciated their story and definitely felt the heartache and helplessness from these characters. It's set in the 90s, and I feel like the art style really complements that well and also gives it a cinematic vibe. There's a roller coaster of emotions to be felt for just one volume, and it really is a bittersweet tragedy. I personally just couldn't keep it on my shelf and probably won't ever reread it, so that's why I don't have a physical copy, but I don't regret having read it once. Then I reread Lynx by Natsuki Kizu. Honestly, I'm probably going to have to reread this again in the future. The first time I read it, I was so confused because I couldn't follow whose story belonged to which character, and then generally who was going out with which guy. There's 4 men and then their partners, each linked in some way, whether they're colleagues or a friend of a friend. I constantly had to keep referring to the character pages at the back of the manga to orient myself. But you know, it's Natsuki Kizu, so I'll continue to reread it until I figure it out. But I think because it involves so many people who have their own backstories, one volume isn't enough to really feel invested, so this was just an okay story to me. Next is the manhwa No Love Zone by Dunby. I believe this is 4 volumes. I'm not going to spend too much time on this because it's honestly your typical workplace office romance between employee and team manager. They're quite toxic to begin with too when it comes to their dynamic at work and their past history. But in some ways, it's nice because there are times when Ji-hyuk helps Eun-gyum out of sticky situations. I remember really liking Eun-gyum's younger siblings as they're really cute, but again, not a story that blew me away and was pretty formulaic with the guy who falls in love at first sight with his mean boss who doesn't adhere to consent, but they have a lot of spicy scenes and eventually they get into a groove where they're on the same page and love each other. I was super excited for this volume release, and it's for I Hear the Sunspot 4 seasons. I really enjoyed the previous series of Limit, so I was anticipating reading more about Kohei and Taichi's relationship development. So Kohei has a hearing impairment while Taichi is his former classmate who he grows close with and eventually gets into a relationship with. They have various challenges up to this point, but also a lot of sweet moments and times where I really love how resilient they are with pushing forward together and in their own respective careers and personal goals. 4 seasons does include a conflict or miscommunication, which did frustrate me, but overall, I was a little disappointed with what little development we got getting in this volume. There's still quite a bit of hesitation from Taichi, and this is the person in me that's getting impatient with slow burns. With how this volume ended, I'm like pleading with the story to move their relationship along because I really like them as characters and as a couple. Then I read volumes 1 and 2 of My Influencer Boyfriend, which is a manhwa, H-U-A, by Gui. I am still waiting for my physical copies to arrive, so I don't have them yet. But it follows Nangi, who partners up with another influencer, Mengtai, in order to try and help boost their online numbers. You can guess what happens after that. It's a straightforward couple volumes that also slightly touches on the anxieties of being an influencer and an influencer that's in a relationship at that, and how different people can be from their online persona versus real life. But ultimately, it's a very sweet story involving a very sweet couple, so I can't wait to receive my volumes. It is an explicit series though, so keep that in mind. I'll talk about these next 3 altogether since they're by Suzumaru Minta, but I read volume 1 of Golden Sparkle and volume 1 of Cupid is Struck by Lightning, plus the continuation Second Strike. These have couples set in high school. So Golden Sparkle revolves around Himaru, who basically skipped health class and doesn't have anyone to turn to for understanding how his body works. In comes Gaku, who offers to teach him. I thought it was a nice average story about discovery and also where the naivety is actually part of the plot. I did like it more than Cupid is Struck by Lightning though. That one follows Shingo, who plays Cupid for his classmates by trying to find out more about the guys these girls are interested in. The next target being Ao, who has a bit of a mysterious air to him, especially with the scar he has on his face. Of course, they get close the more they learn about each other, and honestly, there's not much to this story. It's simple, it's cute, and just a lighthearted romance. These are, again, explicit reads. This next set of series are all by Yu Minadoki, which I read one after the other. It's Sayonara Game Volume 1, Change World Volumes 1 and 2, then Love Nest Volumes 1 and 2, followed by Love Nest Second Volumes 1 and 2. My favorite from all of these was the Love Nest stories and couple. For Sayonara Game and Change World, it focuses on the romance that developed between Arimura and Ito, who knew each other from high school and meet again years later. There's some angst that happens due to jealousy and lack of communication, but overall, I thought the couple from these 2 short stories were okay. For Love Nest and Love Nest Second, it centers around Masato and Asahi, who find themselves becoming roommates. Both having experienced heartbreak, they navigate a changing dynamic, and I think they develop nicely as a couple. They both also have a past that haunts their current relationship, but I think they do their best to overcome and make amends. Like they're total opposites, but complementary at the same time, so I would reread their story for sure. I mentioned this series in one of my recent manga haul videos, but I read this volume by Scarlett Beriko. It follows Keisuke, who mistakenly finds himself wearing pantyhose when putting on his track pants because his sister had been last wearing them. A bit of a silly scenario, but somehow catches the eye of his best friend Masayuki. This one caught me off guard because I actually like this read. I enjoy Scarlett Beriko's art style, and I think this has some really funny scenarios mixed in, along with a small bit of angst. Keisuke's sister is great, although I could have done without some of the side characters. This next webcomic I read online through the artist Shillin's website, which has it posted for free, so it has chapters 1 to 48. But she's also independent and self-published, so I got this printed version as well instead of getting the 7 Seas version, which I know they picked it up for print and I think is releasing this month. But it's cool because the one I have is a signed copy. So Amongst Us has fairly short chapters and is episodic, but it's a GL romance slice of life between Veloge, I think that's how you say her name, I'm not sure, and Blackbird, who are characters from her other long-form fantasy story, Carsophona. But in this alternate universe, rather than one being a sorceress and the other being an assassin assigned to kill her, they're girlfriends going about their days. I've watched Shillin's Twitch streams from time to time, and her art is beautiful, as you can see. There's a charm to each short chapter, and I had to see it as strictly episodic because the events between chapters kind of jump around. She does incorporate a music aspect to it and comedy throughout their interactions. I have their other set of graphic novel prints for Kasefona, so that's still on my TBR. Next, I read chapters 1 to 56 of Frenemies, Thicker Than Blood, a webcomic by Nichtigal and art by HKMI. As you can already assume by the title, it's a friends to enemies to lovers relationship. It's a spicy read as well. I really like the art, and the story is pretty engaging. It follows Haon and Rigon, who grew up together at the same martial arts academy. Something happens to cause them to separate, only to surprisingly encounter each other, but on opposing sides. The very first panel really hooked me in, and the rest is history. There's definitely some scheming going on, which keeps me wondering how things are going to be resolved. Some side characters are also getting more prominent roles, so that's nice to see as well. Then I read this one-shot, Send Them a Farewell Gift for the Lost Time by Kokomi, the same mangaka that did the 2 series, Restart After Coming Back Home and Restart After Going Hungry, both of which I really love, so I was looking forward to checking this one out. You think it's going to be a straightforward story of 2 guys who had broken up and then get back together, but it turns out to be more realistic and messier than that. It felt relatable as I was reading along and seeing the struggle of going back to the person you left in the first place, only to ask if anything has even changed. The art is stunning as expected, and it made me tear up because it's like, how do you choose between what you want to happen, which is something out of your control, and what you know should happen? On another note though, I was pleasantly surprised that Tokyopop licensed this volume for a release in January of next year. The curse continues of me picking up Japanese volumes to only hear that a publisher has picked it up for print in English not too long after. And the last 2 volumes I'll talk about are by the same mangaka, Saki Sukahara, and it's the one-shots The Flower That Seems to Truly Dance and Replay. For the first one, I saw a friend post this volume on Instagram, and the cover caught my eye, so I wanted to check it out. I really enjoyed this as it's a historical setting in the 40s with war looming over Japan. 2 childhood friends are reunited, however, Sotaro is haunted by one of the last things he said before their initial separation regarding Haruomi's traditional dances, something Haruomi is famous for. So upon reuniting, Sotaro sets out to apologize to him. Their gradual rekindling as they kind of get to know each other again is really sweet and comforting, even though it's coupled with a tension between them and with the war threats that put them at risk of separation once more. It did make me a bit anxious as events unfolded, but ultimately I liked their story, which led me to check out another work by Sukahara sensei, and that's Replay. This one is a modern high school setting with a story between Yuta and Ritsu, 2 childhood friends who grew up playing baseball together. Their bond was mostly centered around the sport, but of course, beyond that, there's a question of whether there's something more between them. Nothing too groundbreaking with this one. It's mostly them trying to figure out their relationship beyond this friendship they've always had. Ritsu and Yuta are a cute couple that discover a future together, so it's something that I don't mind rereading. So here's everything that I talked about today. I hope you enjoyed me rambling on as usual about all of these reads. Let me know in the comments if you've checked out any of these series and your thoughts, whether you love them, maybe not so much. But thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you in my next video. Take care.